Hi. Good morning, Chris. How you doing?
Good morning, Michael. I'm doing great. Thank you for asking.
That's good. So I can tell from the background you're not in your office.
No, I'm not, and I don't want to let out where I am because it's so beautiful right now. I don't want anybody to get angry.
Fair enough. Fair enough. So, just to remind everybody, kind of what we talked about last week is that we went over kind of what the basics for what a DWI and kind of how all that goes, and just kind of what it means, what it could mean, why it's important, and what you should and shouldn't do. And now we're going to kind of do a little bit of a deeper dive into the process. And so we're calling it DW Part 2. And let's start from the most important part. So I left the bar, left wherever, driving. All of a sudden, I see lights in my background.
Well, to prepare oneself for that eventuality, and I tell people all the time, if somebody's out, especially in the evening hours, or especially even more so in the late night hours, when many of these DWI arrests take place, I tell people that the officer who pulled them over, whether it's a trooper or a sheriff's deputy or NYPD or a member of a local police agency in whatever municipality the person happens to be in, that officer is trained to interact with drivers of motor vehicles principally. And I tell people all the time, don't think that your car is like your house. Don't think it's like your living room. Don't think that you can be as carefree in the way you drive your car as you are when you're sitting in front of your TV watching a football game. To prepare for the eventuality that somebody will be pulled over, whether you're a passenger in that car or the driver of the car, and if you're out and you've consumed any alcoholic beverages or have taken any medication, and when I say medication, I mean either illicit street drugs, which we all know what those are, or even prescription medication, that you got to prepare well in advance of whenever the pullover actually happens. And first, I tell people, try not to drive if you have been consuming alcoholic beverages or consuming drugs of one sort or another, as I just defined them. But if you do, that you should understand that that officer is trained, and if it's just the basic training, it's weeks and weeks and weeks at a police academy in training on how to observe certain indicators of impaired driving. Such as bloodshot eyes, slurred speech, the odor of an alcoholic beverage emanating from someone's breath, that kind of thing. And certainly things like open containers in a car, empty beer bottles on the floor, things of that sort, drugs in plain view on a console or on an open glove compartment door, you can't do that. You just can't. It's so much different than 35 years ago when I first started practicing. If you're going to consume alcoholic beverages or you're going to smoke pot, and if you're not doing it in the car, you still have to take steps to mask the odor, that everybody knows what somebody smells like when they've been smoking pot. Everybody knows what somebody smells like when they've been drinking, especially if you haven't been drinking. So if you're a police officer and you're on heightened alert anyway, and you have pulled over a vehicle, especially if it's dark and the officer cannot see you as the operator of the motor vehicle, the first thing to do is to turn on the interior lights of the car. And the second thing to do is to put down the window on the driver's side, so that when the officer walks up to you, there's not that plate of glass between you and the officer. The third thing to do is to keep your hands in plain view, typically on the steering wheel, so that the officer, because his or her hand is hovering in close proximity to a service weapon that they are issued, because we don't.
You never know.
You never know. And this work is dangerous, hazardous work, even in quiet, law-abiding communities. especially if they have streets from other places going through them, if they're not completely isolated little communities out in the middle of nowhere.
Mm-hmm.
So if you can remember that, you also have to remember that one of the things that you want to do is you can't have your car smelling like you've been smoking weed in it. You can't have your car smelling like a gin mill because you've been drinking in your car, or you were drinking in some bar somewhere or at a party somewhere, and you've drank enough that your car begins to smell like you. Because very often I've seen police documents say that the odor of an alcoholic beverage wasn't just coming from the motorist's mouth, but it was also coming from the interior of the car. And
so what you're saying in that situation is a lot of people think that if I just take gum, there's no way they can smell the alcohol on. Is that not true?
It's true to an extent, Michael, but I tell people all the time, don't wait until you're on the side of the road to figure out where was that pack of gum that I saw last spring on the floor in the back of the car, or where was that Banaka little aerosol breath mint dispenser that I remember buying at the pharmacy 5 years ago. And what you don't remember is you took it out of the car, or you chewed up all the gum. You got to have those things in place, readily available to you if you get pulled over, because if you get pulled over and you have something that you don't want that police officer to know about, the best way to have that police officer not know that you've been drinking or smoking pot is to make sure that you got a deodorizer in your car that smells like something else. Typically, you can buy them in convenience stores, and certainly in motor vehicle parts stores, those deodorizers that hang from the rear view mirror or from some other part of your car. And while I'm mentioning rear view mirrors, the new wrinkle, if you will, for law enforcement officers that I become involved with on a daily basis is that they're pulling people over for having the air freshener hanging from the rear view mirror of the car. And there's a provision of the vehicle and traffic law.
Really?
There's a provision in the vehicle and traffic law that they are using, these law enforcement officers are using as the legal authority to pull you over. So if you think you're driving the speed limit, the posted speed limit, and you're not going over the double yellow line, but you have one of those air fresheners hanging off your rear view mirror, don't think that the officer may not stop you, especially if it's in the later hours of the day, when statistically, anybody who does this kind of work will tell you that the percentage of motorists on the road who are driving while impaired by drugs or driving while intoxicated by alcohol, or a combination of those two, that percentage goes way up once the afternoon and evening, and certainly the late night hours go. I just drove at 3:30 in the morning. I left my house this morning to drive out to Long Island, and the only cars on the road were police cars and a random motorist. And if you're that random motorist, the odds are much more substantial that the police officer will find some basis to pull you over just because he or she wants to interact with you. And they'll say that they were checking on you because you were driving slightly erratically, but what they really want to do is they want to talk to you. They want to be able to look in your car. That's why they have a flashlight with them if it's late at night or early in the morning. They want to get down with the window open, and they want to get as close to you as they can to smell your breath and see if you have any of those indicia, the odor of an alcoholic beverage or the odor of marijuana if you've been smoking pot. They want to look in your eyes. They want to see whether your eyes are bloodshot, the whites of your eyes are bloodshot. And I say this to people because you say to yourself, well, why don't I just leave the window up? If you leave the window up, that's not going to suffice. They're going to pound on the window, and they're going to tell you to put the window down. And you can either get into a fight on the side of a road at night with somebody from law enforcement, which I don't recommend to anybody.
Never ends well.
For a myriad of reasons, but it's just not a good idea. If you do interact with someone under those circumstances, you want it to be uneventful. you want to look in the eyes of whoever's questioning you. And remember, they'll have a flashlight. So that flashlight, I've seen the device where the flashlight is also a breath testing device, because the flashlight has a little recorder on the bottom that will record and diagnose a breath sample to determine whether there's alcohol in that breath sample or not. Okay.
Wow.
So if, and I've seen that device and I've seen it used. You obviously don't want to be in a situation where the police officer comes to some determination that he or she wants you to take the next step, which is, can you please step out of your vehicle? Because if you're stepping out of your vehicle at that point, I could probably count on one hand over 35 years how many motorists have passed the standardized field sobriety testing that everybody's familiar with, because it's either finger to the nose, walk the line, the straight line, heel toe fashion, 1 foot in front of the other, or stand on one leg. Because even if you're an Olympic gymnast, those tasks can be rather difficult to perform, especially if you're on the side of the road, and especially if it's late at night. And if you've had something to drink, or even if you're just very, very tired, the chances are that, according to whoever the officer is who is administering those exams to you, those field sobriety tests, he or she is never going to be satisfied with substantial compliance with whatever the dictates are that he or she is giving you. And these instructions, they're trained to administer before you undertake to do what you think they want you to do. So if you get to that point, the chances are overwhelming. And when I drive by those scenes where I see someone on the side of a road, and I don't know if anybody else has ever seen it, but I've seen plenty of them, my heart always goes out to the motorist, because I know that within a very, very short period of time, they're going to be in handcuffs in the back of that police car. And
wow.
And that becomes a very prohibitively expensive undertaking to defend yourself, to have your car towed, the potential insurance repercussions and things like that, which is left today. But you can't let yourself be taken out of a car by a police officer where all of a sudden you remember, oh, I got drugs in my pocket. You know, that leads to other charges, because after you fail the standardized field sobriety tests and you're placed under arrest, for inventory purposes, the officer will either, while you're in the road there, or in a very short period of time thereafter back at the police station, they'll have you empty your pockets. And if they find drugs in your pockets, and you don't have them in a proper container, if they're prescription medication, or if they're just what we call street drugs, coke, heroin, that kind of thing, or just a handful of loose pills, you will be charged with something in addition to the drunk driving charge or the driving while impaired by drugs charge that you have initially come into contact with the police officer.
Oh, wow. Wow. So that's a lot. And one of the things you touched on was the flashlight with the breathalyzer, and that's kind of a perfect way to stop, because next week we're going to talk about the breathalyzer. So thanks a lot, Chris, for joining in on your vacation. We really appreciate it. I'm looking forward to talking next week.
Good to see you.
You too.